I apologize, but Jesse Daystar from Triangle Lifecycle Assessment seems to be AWOL. So you get me. That would be, we're sending in junior varsity. Hey, Brian, thanks for coming. This is the chair of Piedmont's board of directors. And so I'm going to go ahead and do it. I have no slides and I have no presentation. I am pinch hitting here for Jesse. But I thought that what I could do is just sort of give you some backstory on life cycle analysis in general through the Piedmont eye view of the world, and then we can bust it open into Q&A. And I'm the guy that feeds Jesse his data. So I've been through this for a year, so it's not like I'm a complete slouch here. So I want to kick it off with back when we were in the trailer at Piedmont Biodiesel. First of all, life cycle analysis, what are we doing? We're trying to get our heads around every BTU that goes into the process. So we want to look at, let's say, our tanks. What's the embodied energy that goes into the tanks? Is it, it's going to be higher if you're, well, you're Ann from Southern Energy. You're John Bonnet's folks. Welcome. So we want to take the embodied energy of our plant. You know, what are you looking at? Stainless steel versus plastic versus these kinds of things. You want to come up with a line of that. You want to look at the amount of energy that goes into your feedstock production. So if you're, say, using virgin soybean oil, you've got the herbicides and the pesticides and the petroleum that goes into the tractors and the petroleum that gets used to move these feedstocks around. So the distance from which your feedstocks are coming is a critically important number in your LCA. So you're basically, when you want to do a life cycle analysis of anything, you do this. And you start saying, where does it come from, how far, how much energy goes into that, and you also then look at your side streams. So what's going to happen to those BTUs that you're throwing away if it's glycerin? Or what do you look at, say, the side streams of your entire plant? So one of the things that we did at Piedmont early on is we said, let's go into this life cycle analysis. And one of the very first ones that was published for biodiesel was done on Matt Rudolph's plant back in the day. And
isn't this LCA? It's not LCA.
This is LCA. There's no Jesse Daystar, and so they sent in junior varsity. That's right. And so what happens is, at the original co-op plant that Matt was running, the one that was putting out 1,000 gallons a week at its peak, our LCA was pretty strong. And one of the ways to think about this is energy balance. One of the ways to think is how many fossil BTUs in versus how many renewable BTUs back out. And let's look at that ratio. So if you start with, say, the National Biodiesel Board's numbers, they'll say that biodiesel from virgin soybean is about 1 to 3.2, which, all right, not bad.
That's old. It's gotten better since.
And they've started upping it over the years. So they keep trying to figure out ways to do it. And of course, how do you up it? Well, you throw on solar for your heating rather than using electric, and you get your feedstocks from a closer proximity, and you distribute your fuel out to a closer proximity. And you do these kinds of things to try to increase your life cycle analysis score or your energy balance score. So when your plant is in an old falling down trailer and it's cobbled together with things that you bought at the scrapyard and retrieved from the waste stream, you're going to have a much higher LCA score than when your plant is, commercially produced in stainless steel instead of poly and so on and so forth. So that's at the heart of it. So, and this is on Piedmont's website. You can go, and if you do a search on LCA, the first assessment that we had done by Scott Hoover comes up. He was a graduate student, and he just took a crack at it. And it's really one of the early publications in the area. And I would say that if you look at it now, it's kind of wrong, but it was a start. Okay, Jesse Daystar, the guy that didn't show up today, is a PhD guy from NC State, and he, years ago, decided that he was going to go into forming a new company called Triangle Lifecycle Assessment. And I was strongly encouraging him to do this, and so we hired him to come to the plant and crawl through. And our first LCA was done on poultry fat. And poultry fat gives you a very low score. And one of the reasons poultry fat gives you a low score is because a whole bunch of energy goes into feeding chickens. The production of meat is actually a brutally inefficient process of energy, right? So if you think about it, it takes something like 7 pounds of grain to produce a pound of chicken. So you're right off the bat, you're in a very tough spot using poultry fat as your LCA. So we came out with you can look at it on our website. It was more like it was less than soy. It was less than the 1 to 3.2. It was kind of a 1 to 1 point something. Way down there with ethanol. By the way, biodiesel folks love to talk about energy balance in the context of biofuels because we clobber ethanol. Right? So ethanol has a negligible energy balance. People think that you have a 1 to 1.67 or maybe a 1 to 1, or sometimes people store it as negative depending on how far you want to get into it. David Pimental, the guy up at Cornell, who is sort of an expert in this, he likes to go down to the lunches that get served to the people who are harvesting the corn. And by the time we throw on that piece of apple pie, ethanol from corn is negative, and so people in biodiesel are generally positive and love to bash on LCA, or energy balance against ethanol. So what's next? Okay, so Piedmont started on virgin soy, then we moved to poultry. Our numbers would have declined at that point, and then we moved over to waste, and at that point, our numbers skyrocketed. And our numbers right now are something like 1 to 7, which is outstanding and is a really good score from an energy perspective. Now, how do we do that? How do we improve things? Well, we switched our boiler system from being electric to running on side streams. So we run recovered biodiesel, we run free fatty acids, we run vegetable oil as our boiler system. Big jump up. 2, you put in solar panels to heat your wash water, for instance. 3, we have gone after every side stream at the plant. And when I say that, I don't just mean sorting out the glycerin cocktail. I mean pallets. You don't think about pallets. We went from pallets as being a waste to pallets worth $1 a piece. And so selling used pallets. Drums. Plastic drums, metal drums. If you're landfilling a whole bunch of plastic, if you're cutting up totes and landfilling it, that's expensive from an energy perspective, and it gets scored against you. So when you look at the LCA numbers on our website, you'll see the tons of waste that came out of Piedmont's plant, and you'll see that those tons of waste have gone down. So if you want to improve your score, you really have to go after everything. And of course, if you're in the business, how many of you guys are commercial producers? Commercial producers? What's that?
I'm working in commercial.
Okay, so you know that the business model calls for monetizing everything. And actually, if you come to Piedmont, you'll see we bring in these totes, and the totes are full of triglycerides, and they're nasty and janky, and you can only get through this little 4-inch cap, and they can't be cleaned. Right? So what are you going to do with a tote that is full of rancid, smelly stuff that can't be cleaned? That's simple. You either cut the top off of it, that gets landfilled, and then you can clean it. Cleaning it goes into compost, that helps your score. Then you sell the tote as for aquaponics or to stonemasons so that they can pile their stones in. Or you'll see we cut them in half sometimes and use them for raised bed gardening. So we actually have thousands of dollars a month of revenue that comes through our plant from spent containers. And it's the same thing. Sometimes, if we're in a bind on plastic drums, it's like, all right, we've got the Shikori Festival coming up. Let's donate a truckload of these things as trash cans. Better than landfilling, better than scoring against you on your LCA.
What are you guys buying in such quantity that you need all these drums? You're buying all these drums on a monthly basis?
Yeah, so we buy dregs from nutraceutical companies. And what happens is, when the nutraceutical company is cutting over their lines, or also we buy from makeup companies. So if you think about, let's say you're running chapstick. You've got 3-inch lines running through your plant, and you are moving from lemon-infused almond oil over to the next product that you're going to make. You've made 1 million pieces of chapstick.
Yeah, you've got a 3-inch line, 50 feet long. You get the drugs.
You got it, and you got a whole plant that you're cleaning out.
A lot of people get methanol that way.
What's that?
A lot of people get methanol like that too.
I don't know about scrap methanol. I haven't heard, but
yeah, I mean methanol is good for cleaning out, to clean out lines, whatever kind of
Gotcha.
process.
Right. So I've never had a good waste methanol side stream because it it picks up water so much. So if you send methanol through your plant as a cleaning, it's going to come back so wet I can't use it. So but anyway, the vegetable oil, different thing. The vegetable oil comes in wet, we just dewater it and off we go. So some of these guys, because it's an occasional thing, they might be running a quarter of a year and then they do a purge of their lines, they'll do it into drums. And it's not that significant to them, i.e. Big, huge plants. And so we have a nutraceutical producer that creates 88 55-gallon drums of product. I beg them to let us spot a tanker truck, they won't do it. And so it goes into drums, and in they come. In their case, they're using algae oil. They're an algae producer, and what happens is 88 drums come in, and the last 2 or 3 are solid. And we refer to this as fish goo at the plant. And again, what happens? You're vacuuming out drums all day, right? You got 88 of these drums, and you're just going with your stinger, and you're walking on the top, and you're like vacuuming out drums. And then you get to the last 1.5, and it doesn't budge. It's solid and at ambient temperature. Well, what do you do with it? We used to, throw it over to the side, throw it over to the side, throw it over to the side. We don't have any way. You can't heat it. It's plastic. How are you going to get at this stuff? And so what eventually would happen is you build up the big wall of fish goo. And, it's a couple drums a couple times a month, and it doesn't take long before all your money is sitting in your yard. So what do? You sawzall off the top, you shovel it into a metal drum, you turn it into liquid, it stings to high heaven. You basically do the rendering, we build a little rendering plant, we render it into liquid, and we get it into the reactors, and off she goes. It's the same thing. Your money is in the yard, or your BTUs are in the yard. The day that you can get all of your fish goo flowing through the plant is not only the day that you're going to make more money, it's also the day that you're going to improve your life cycle analysis, because you don't have the luxury of that. So these dregs, whether it's from makeup or nutraceutical, is where all these containers come from. And in the case of the totes, they're actually referred to in the business as one-way totes, because nobody will take them back. It's kind of crazy. You buy a tote full of methylate, and when we're done with those ones, they're spotless. They're easy to spray out with a garden hose, and so we sell those for rainwater catchment systems. We're selling to rainwater, we're selling to aquaponics, we're selling to gardeners, we're selling to anyone that will take any kind of container. Yeah.
So when you sell a tote like that to rainwater collection, you don't take any penalty at all in your life cycle, because it's really being downcycled of other.
It's a good point.
You're supposed to consider the waste end in the life cycle too, right?
You're absolutely right, and we don't measure that. So I get $100 for a clean tote. I get $20 for a nasty tote. The tote, the cost of that tote is generally, and of course there's a difference between money and energy here.
Right.
But
that's what I was going to be my next.
Right. So we don't go that far. So what we measure is if it's going into the landfill, it's against us. If it's going off to any other purpose, it's not. But your thinking is completely right.
So you're sort of taking a co-product credit on the energy, but you're taking all the energy as a credit.
That's correct. No, you're absolutely right. So and by the way, this space of LCA, and Jeremy, you may have studied some of this. I mean, the models are changing. If Jesse were here, I'm sure his slides would be, we started out with this Greek model, and then we switched to this model, and it's a rapidly evolving science.
It is. It's super dynamic, and you can look at mass, or you can look at money, or you can look at energy. There's a lot of different kind of
the allocation methods are tough. Right?
But there is an ISO standard for how to conduct an LCA, and it's based on mass. That's the most common. So people look at input-output.
Right. Now, the Hewitt Pottery here in town, Carol Hewitt is one of our speakers at this conference. They did an LCA on their pots. What a fantastic idea. In fact, I think it is a dynamic space, and I think the day will come where everything will be labeled. Someday there will be a score, and so you can look at your phone and say, what's the life cycle analysis on this? Look at the bottom of your plate. I think that is probably what the future will hold as energy supplies get tighter. I mean, maybe I did believe this for the past decade. I'm not sure. I feel like the new natural gas glut may change everything, because we've got a 200-year supply of cheap energy, and it may be that we don't care. We'll just start firing our kilns with natural gas and not bother scoring anything. So natural gas is kind of kicking the legs out from underneath the renewable.
But it still, plays back to life cycle when you look at greenhouse gas emissions. And you can also look at that as a metric. You can convert it back into grams.
That's totally right.
CO2 equivalent. So then the fracking gas really, is penalized for that. Comparing it to a pottery made from a.
Yeah, totally right. Yes.
DOD is trying to get it at the costs. They're looking at it from a greenhouse gas, but they are, they've got it in categories of 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. One is to stop producing it. One is to look at byproducts. And the third one is how do you buy from people and hold them accountable for the greenhouse gas that they produce.
Right. Push it through the supply chain. That's absolutely right.
But there's just no way to get at it for them right yet. They're not doing anything with that because it's just, this is such a...
Okay, so we had some luck with that. We had some luck. Jesse Daystar did not show up. I'm the LCA guy. That's why I can't take the call right now.
I passed my
I know, I was just bragging about the Hewitt Pottery.
CA.
So George, one of the things that we did, we were buying a lot of our poultry fat from Valley Proteins. Valley Proteins is what a big rendering company in the Southeast. They're sort of the evil empire of crease collection around here. And we were able to get their trucks over to B20. And so that was a supply chain move that we made that actually improved our score. So if their trucks are coming to the plant, the year that we ran poultry fat, we made about 1.3 million gallons of fuel. We turned a truck every day and a half. So every day and a half, there was a feedstock truck arriving. And if you can get those trucks over to B20, it had a material impact on the amount of energy associated with our feedstock collection. Nowadays, we're on waste. And so, first of all, it's our trucks predominantly. I still buy from others, but it's predominantly our trucks that are all running on B100. Helps your score. 2, most of my feedstocks come from within 50 miles away right now. Occasionally we'll do a run if we find something stranded somewhere and it's a good price, we'll break our 50-mile rule. But in general, you move to waste, you charge a bunch of those BTUs to the French fry. Now I'm starting at the dumpster instead of the field. And then you're putting it within 50 miles away on a truck that you're picking it up on B100. These are the kinds of things that really boost your score into the stratosphere.
Because it's the argument, and we've had this discussion when I first got into this, 2 or 3 years ago, of how to articulate that to the DoD handlers, who I'm trying to bring this to, and haven't really looked at it from an energy standpoint. So it'd be interesting to get those numbers and see if I can make that case.
So I'll look at the LCAs on your website. I didn't realize they were public. But how did the person who did the LCAs go about measuring the utility of each product? Because when I've done a couple of LCAs, they're like really bad and dabbly. But measuring the utility at a certain step is the hardest thing, at least from what I found for some of the things I worked on. So how do you say this many BTU are assigned to the French fry and this many BTU are assigned to the biodiesel? How do you divide up the use of whatever you're counting?
Okay, so again, there's different models and different methods of doing it. The simplified way that I think about it is, first of all, I start at the dumpster. So all the herbicides, pesticides, petroleum that went into that fry, not my problem.
Yeah.
So I'm picking it up at the dumpster, at which point, I'm putting it into a metal dumpster. I'm vacuuming it up into my B100 truck. I'm bringing it 15 miles to my plant. I'm probably throwing away about 20%. So about 20% of what we bring in, it's water and chunks and nastiness. We call that, at Piedmont we call it schmutz. And I've paid to get rid of schmutz. I've composted schmutz. And right now, I deliver my schmutz to a pig farmer. In fact, if you guys are here for Saturday night, we're going to be eating a pig that has been raised on our schmutz.
That boosts your score a lot.
It does boost your score. It's a relative thing. That's the way to think about it. Now, the other issue is that, and the pig farmer, by the way, runs his operation on B100. Actually, that's an interesting one because I'm sitting here disposing of schmutz, and we have a lot of it when we're at full production, thousands and thousands of gallons a month. And what he was doing, and I don't think he might be coming Saturday night. You might want to talk to him. He was going down to Carolina Brewery and picking up the spent distiller's grains, and he was feeding those to the pigs. And he noticed that normally pigs devour everything in their path. They pig out. Normally, you throw an angel food cake and it's like gone in one bite. Okay, but the pigs would kind of nibble at the distiller's grains. They would eat it more like a mineral rather than consuming it. And so he started irrigating it with well water. And he was taking his well water and basically diluting whatever it was that was off-putting in the distiller grains. It was off-putting to the pigs. So I had this conversation with him once, and I said, you should try diluting it with our schmutz. It's basically French fry water. See what that does. And so we went in, we did an experiment. I think I took 500 gallons out, and we provided him with a couple of used totes, and they went nuts. So they really started pigging out on this stuff. And he also noticed an improvement in their coats. So he actually saw a health benefit to the pigs, silkier coats because of the increased fat in their diet that we deliver. So that's the kind of thing that if you want to really chew away at your LCA numbers, you develop these kinds of systems and you invest time and energy to finding every last home for every last side stream that you can get your hands on.
Do your LCAs provide sort of like a preamble that describes why you chose, our LCA starts at the dumpster. It doesn't start with a French fry because of these factors or things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
There's some of that there. It may not be as complete as you would like, but there's some of it there, and we're happy to, drill down further. A lot of our LCAs get cited in the literature because not a lot of people do it, and the people that do it don't publish it. They don't want to tell you that they're at 1 to 2 or something like that, and so we publish our scores whether they're good or bad, and it's something that we feel like we've contributed to the industry and so on. So that's the game. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you've kind of decided with waste fryer oil to say it has no embodied, energy penalty, but then with the poultry fat, you say that it does have you have to consider the feed for the poultry and all that. And it seems inconsistent because both of them have economic value, right? That somebody else would buy that yellow grease if you didn't. And so I'm not sure if that's a fair comparison to say that all the energy of feeding the poultry has to be scored against you.
Yeah.
And,
okay, so I think you're absolutely right. And something we need to realize is that in the early days of this, a lot of that vegetable oil was free.
Right.
So the poultry fat you're buying as a rendered substance. So when they're, the boneless breast of chicken that we eat from the grocery store, the nasty commodity chicken, they basically trim it. Those trimmings come out as a solid. They get sent down to Fayetteville. They get turned into a liquid, and then they get delivered to the plant at 180 degrees. By the way, if there are any SVOers in the room, the 18-wheelers that deliver poultry fat do exactly what you do in that they take waste heat from their radiator system and dump them into the trailers to deliver that stuff, and they essentially never turn the trucks off. It comes into the plant at 180, and if you're going to be working on poultry fat, you kind of got to keep it there. It doesn't, it's not your family gets fuller. So part of our problem would be this is free or significantly cheaper than what we paid for it, and that would explain. But you are right. If you could get that grease aggregated and down to the rendering plant, you could sell it into animal feeds, and that might be a more fair comparison.
But it seems like you could argue with the poultry fat that the purpose why you were feeding all this grain to the chickens wasn't to make the poultry fat, it was to make the chickens, and so you could say that poultry fat is really a waste product of the meat production, and so you shouldn't take it as a penalty in the LCA sense.
Okay.
You've hit probably the one big issue with LCAs is there are a million ways you can count it,
That's
and there is no, and I think it's frustrating to a lot of people who do LCAs because they're very, like numbers, discrete things, very like, this is it. But when it comes down to it, LCAs are sort of like saying, I want to count this and I don't want to count that just because, for whatever reason. There isn't like this is 2 times better than this one or whatever.
Well, I mean, you're completely right, which is the same of statistics in anything.
Which is fine.
We can make the
Engineering is
statistics.
all about just making a judgment call at some point and
Telling the story,
Yeah,
telling the story that we want to
whatever
tell.
suits your needs.
You know,
Yeah,
so-
if I may, that's the reason why there should be some kind of a standard.
Yes.
So you can compare apples to apples, because you brought up, a great point. Can you really substitute a waste for what is actually a commodity? Because if you want to talk about substitution, which is kind of the most critical view of LCA for biofuels, then any waste, vegetable oil, used cooking oil, or any animal fat is actually already going to be bought by somebody for some other use. And so as soon as you take that off the market, then you actually do incur a penalty, environmentally speaking, or
So-
energetically speaking.
That's completely.
That's the issue, it's energetically speaking. So it's a cost per BTU. And if you've improved that cost for a downstream use, and I think the key is you gotta look at the cost not just as the dollars of the actual energy work itself, but what the off gas or the byproduct of that use is.
And that's why it's important to choose what's your procedure, like what's your SOP, standard operating procedure, what's your protocol for doing it, and what's your metric? Is it dollars, is it mass, is it energy, is it greenhouse gases? So you have to be consistent across that.
I think it's true. Now, the other thing is, we do capture a fair bit of used cooking oil that was destined for the landfill.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not true of restaurants. Vacuuming up from the back of restaurants, people are fighting for that stuff. That's where the grease wars are on, and you can make a legitimate argument that that's actually not a waste. I mean, how do we define waste? Waste is something that you don't get paid for. Right? Waste is entirely a human invention. There is no waste in nature. We have invented waste through an economic system that says, I'm not going to pay you for it, therefore it's waste. The minute you give me a penny, it's a commodity, and it moves from being a waste to something I can sell. But in the case of our collections over the years, one of the things we've done is we've put collections at the recycle centers. And Granny still fills up her Wesson bottle on the door of the fridge, and when it's full, throws it in the trash or dumps it down the drain. And there are many, many, many gallons like that are truly waste because Granny's not going to get paid for it. And so when you start putting out containers at the recycle centers and you start collecting it, I've watched these. They've gone from marginal, not interesting, but the government's put them out. They start putting flyers in their tax bills. The years go on, and now thousands and thousands of gallons come at Piedmont from what I would say, well, from the household, which I would say was from the refrigerator door. So those are really incremental gallons that were never destined to make it to the global commodity markets. And that, of course, is the other thing about being on waste, is there's stranded loads. There's loads that are not destined for for their intended purpose. So, and we get those all the time. We call them bluebirds because the bluebird flew by, and so what's your problem? Oh, you're a makeup company, and for some reason someone dropped off 15 totes of virgin soybean oil that you're no longer making that product, you can't use it, and it's blocking your traffic down in your dock area. And while you have a forklift, you don't have any way to really get at it, and what you need is a vacuum truck that can back in tight and get these things empty. And it's like, be right there. We get that. And so we get bluebirds. But my biggest heartbreak was a load of peanut oil. I had a full tanker load of peanut oil, 6,500 gallons. The way we buy feedstocks at Piedmont is you send me a sample. The lab puts a value on the sample. Give you 11 cents, give you 22 cents, whatever we say it is. And then when you pull in to the plant to deliver, after we've agreed on the price, we dip your tank, and we really need those samples to match, right? So don't send me beautiful 22 cent a pound stuff and then show up at the gate with 15 cent a pound stuff, or I'm gonna have to give you a haircut. I'm gonna have to either turn you away, or we're gonna have to renegotiate our contract on the spot. So here is a virgin thing of peanut oil. Sample comes in beautiful, price is right, in it comes full load. The guy rented a gasoline tanker to ship it to us. We dipped it. It's exactly the same. It smells like gasoline. couldn't take it. My lab doesn't have any way to account for what happened in my reactors. I had to turn away an entire load of virgin peanut oil, and the only thing wrong with it, as far as I could tell, is it smelled like gasoline. But we weren't able to take that chance. And the other bluebird that flew by once upon a time was FDA agents with sidearms raided a Chinese food distribution center in Durham. We rented a pair of box trucks and showed up and packed them by hand with about 4,000 gallons in cubies. And we brought these box trucks in, and again, same thing. I've got a huge plastic nightmare on my hands here. So we rented a plastic dumpster from the plastic recycle guys that would recycle those, and then we actually have an anarchist community on the side of town. I actually hired all the anarchists to come out, and it was like ants for about a week of just taking these things, cracking them, plug, plug, plug into the trough, breaking off the cardboard for cardboard recycling, squishing the plastic for plastic recycling. And Bob likes to joke that I was the one that could organize the anarchists. It's amazing what $10 an hour will do.
You know, I was thinking about going back to the other uses for those. It'd be interesting to be able to compare the alternative life of that thing, do a life cycle analysis on what would happen to it if it didn't come into biodiesel.
So I think in many times it would be higher. I mean, there are higher values to used cooking oil than biodiesel. I mean, makeup, like chapstick, you know,
No, I mean energy-wise. If you're talking about energy, you know, the energy costs, or you know,
Gotcha.
cost-benefit analysis for how much energy you burn to make biodiesel.
Right.
And that's got to be high. And what is the impacts, the energy impacts of the alternative for that? I mean, if you look at it that way, and it turns out that the alternatives burn even more fossil fuels, utilize more energy in the alternative to biodiesel, that really makes it easier if it's the other way around.
It's totally right, and that's actually one of the reasons we love greenhouse gas emissions as the standard, right? Because let's use GHG, because if you're not using my product, you're using a petroleum product, and I win.
Right.
So that's
Or it
absolutely
goes
right.
back into something else, animal feed, and what's the cost of animal feed? Right back into it. So the backside of that is what happens to it otherwise.
Yeah.
Whether the greenhouse gas or the energy costs of not using it for fuel, not getting rid of it.
Right.
Kind of threading a couple things, like you were talking about standards, and you were mentioning how, like, looking forward to the day where everything is graded on an LCA scale. Be interesting, and it'd have to absolutely be standardized, but it'd be interesting to see, in that process, does the restaurant or the cooking oil provider, you're taking it from the dumpster, it's got zero from that point, it's a waste product, but on the front end of that, they look at it and say, well, I know it's going into biofuel production, so, that's
So
not.
who claims it on the chain?
Right,
And we
yeah,
have to be careful. One of the things is, we've got this monster solar array at the plant, and when Jesse was doing it's only been commissioned for the last couple of years, but when Jesse was doing one of our last, he went ahead and calculated the solar electricity that's generated on site, and of course that gave us a big boost in score. And we had to throw that out because the guy that owns the solar array in the yard at the plant claims it for his recording studio. So we can't claim it on our fuel. It would be double counting. So you're absolutely right about that. You can't let everybody claim every electron.
Well, yeah, and then when you go back and determine what was the input cost of those solar panels to begin with, I mean, that's always been the thing with solar, right? The payback period on the actual energy benefits you receive from the energy expended to build them isn't there.
LCAs on solar actually are doing fairly well these days.
Yeah, there's been big gains on that front. I think you're talking about earlier days. That the increases in efficiency and the lowering of costs have made solar payback much, much faster.
Lowering of the industrial energy inputs to make them.
Yeah. So solar's gone great.
Well, dollar-wise, it's come, down 300 400%.
They're a waste manufacturer like we are, like us biodiesel producers. They use waste silicon that isn't computer grade, but it's still high enough grade that you can make the little wafers to make the solar cells. And so that's where a lot of silicon's coming
Yeah,
from.
just don't.
I didn't know that, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. And there's a German company, and this is starting to become the new thing, because we're finally getting to the point where solar panels are dying in large numbers, and we have to figure out what to do with them, is you can actually recycle the wafers. So you burn the panel, you vaporize everything off the wafer, and then you go back and you redope it, and then it's good again.
Again, staying consistent though, we're talking dollars or energy.
We're talking either way.
Yeah.
Either
I
way.
mean, what's the energy cost
Yeah.
to make it?
Yeah, I mean, you're all right. It's absolutely right. I mean, for those of you who were at the Chow last night, you saw that, John Bonnet's presentation on biochar. What drives me nuts about biochar, and never gets mentioned, is that 80% of it is heat.
Yeah.
So we're burning something to make a soil amendment. We're pissing 80% of it into the atmosphere.
But
So
you use the heat for like steam generation electricity.
Gotcha.
You're offsetting
Absolutely.
bulbs or something like that.
bingo. So
Yeah,
if you're
let's
heating a
find a
greenhouse,
byproduct. It's-
if you're eating a greenhouse that's producing food, check. If your heat is going into my system as a supplement, so I'm burning less fat, check. But so many people that are out making biochar down on the farm,
Yeah,
get a big cooker, and it's like, oh, look at me, I'm making biochar to build a soil reef in my soil. It's like, stop, you idiot, is what I would like to say to the biochar community. You got that on film, right?
We got that.
Lyle, I'm really interested in producer-specific LCAs, and I'm wondering what kind of continuing data collection you guys do at Piedmont, and then what kind of areas you identify as the next things to incrementally get more sustainable.
Yeah, what have we got on the horizon?
And what kind of, I know you collect a lot of data because that's all part of business. So, but you keep track of energy and you have all that in your.
We do. I mean, what happens is it's time for LCA, we start digging. We've got records of everything. How many gallons got burned in the boilers, how many gallons went into the trucks, and how many tons got shipped of waste and so on. We've got records of all that.
Mm-hmm.
And the trick is, what have we got left to go after? One is wash water. So I still have a wash water waste stream that comes out of my plant. One is filter media. Filter media is kind of a big one, actually. I landfill tons of filter media every year, and that stuff that is so wasteful because it's basically a talc. Those of you who've used filter presses, you're dumping like baby powder in, and then you're pressing it out, and it's hanging onto soaps and pulling impurities out of fuel. That stuff loves to spontaneously combust. So we've had a plant fire, we've had fires in dumpsters. It catches on fire instantly. Because what is it? It's like biodiesel ensconced baby powder. It loves to go up in flames. Now, you say, well, gosh, there's all this energy that you're putting in the landfill. And the standard operating procedure at our plant and many others is to put it into the vessel and coat it with water, cover it with water so that it doesn't catch fire. And then off to the landfill she goes. Extremely wasteful by the ton. Especially when you know there's good energy in there. You know there's good energy in there because it wants to catch fire. So what can you do? Now, the problem with it is, and we've done some incineration of this, and you think, well, let's burn it. Because if we can burn it, we can take that heat and eliminate that waste stream. The problem when you burn this stuff is it produces this micro-fine film or slime. And so after hanging out, burning it, you go home at night and you don't even notice that it's cycling. It's so almost imperceptible that you're covered in this stuff. So you're putting in super microfine particulate into the air. And scrubbing that, catching that, converting that is not something we have any expertise in. But the one conclusion we come to is that you can't burn it. I mean, you can't burn it unless you've got some sort of catalytic converter or something that's going to zap that stuff before it goes into the air. Because we have to be mindful of this, right? No point in going after the waste stream and killing ourselves.
So I'm assuming you guys generate RINs, right?
We do.
Okay. Is your record keeping any more stringent than what you need for RINs generation to do LCAs? I've always wanted to do an LCA for our product at our plant.
Yes.
And, yeah, I know, building the plant isn't included in RINs and all the record keeping for that, but, how many gallons of fuel we produce, what are the inputs, that's all included. Is that what you use as your source data for your LCAs, or do you intentionally go out and say, I'm collecting data for my LCAs?
No, so we feed it. So our RINs attestment feeds our LCA.
Okay.
It's not a one-for-one entire, but it is one of the sources that feeds us. Yeah, absolutely.
Is it like majority or?
No.
Okay.
No. So so what do we got? Things that feed it. Well, actually, I should look at this the other way around. LCA helps feed RINs attestment. LCA helps feed, we're a B Corp, so we have to do a B certification on an annual basis, and so LCA helps feed our B certification. For a while there, we were RSB certified. That's the Roundtable on Sustainable Biofuels, Matt Root office here from RSB. And so our LCA would help feed our RSB. But they're all different. B Corp is asking for something different from RSB, and RSB is looking for something different from, we use Eco Engineers, one of the sponsors of this conference, and so when we do an engineering review with Eco Engineers, they're looking for, they're all sort of different.
Okay.
So the way to think of it, I think, is get your LCA in place and use that data to feed the other thing. So it's nice, because it makes my B Corp recertification much easier. Although, the guys at B Corp don't really understand energy very well. They still do all of their measurement in kilowatt hours. So it's crazy if you think that we have 133,000 BTUs in a gallon of biodiesel. All we have to do is convert that to a kilowatt hour, and that goes into our B Corp score. It's nuts. So B Corp is more interested in other things like social and fairness and equity and these kinds of things than they are in energy. I think that they're way behind on energy, and I scream mightily about this every year.
So you kind of, I think, just touched on it, but from a business standpoint, where's the? Obviously, it's good to know, and it's something that I think needs to keep continuing to keep going. But where does the business value in the LCA come in? And is it to do the B Corp certification? I mean, with the RINs, there's a tangible dollar add to the bottom line on the business, and you have to do it. But
that's a huge. Okay, the answer is it's a loser.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to, but the truth of the matter is that we spend money on LCA that we don't have to. We publish it, we give it away for free. I suppose we have a fairly active consulting business at Piedmont, so perhaps it might pay back in some of our $200 an hour consulting that we do, but not really. And at the end of the day, we're not obligated to do it. We don't sell it. It doesn't help us.
Yeah.
So it actually adds to my regulatory cost per gallon. So, and on our website or in an energy blog or somewhere on biofuels.coop, we did a pie chart of the regulatory cost per gallon. And many of these things are self-imposed. So I don't need to be a B Corp. I get to pay to be a B Corp. And have I sold 1 gallon of fuel extra because I'm a B Corp? No. Do oil companies care? I have 2 customers. I have our cooperative, which is 400 families that are powering themselves on B100. We run a little B100 community trail, 7 locations, highly successful. You can think of them as an off-take customer. They take 50, 60,000 gallons of fuel every year. And then most of our fuel, though, is sold to oil companies. Do some of the members care that we're a B Corp? Maybe, haven't heard. What do they care about? They care that the tank is full, the pump is working, they can get their 15 gallons at one of our inconvenient locations, and then it all works and it's not a mess and so on. All right, so these self-imposed regulatory costs, I think they're part of our mission, and we tend to be a mission-driven company, but they're not economically a good idea. I just dropped RSB, and we dropped RSB because it was fiendishly expensive and fiendishly complex, and I would say didn't matter to anybody who buys our fuel. Am I out of time, Andy? Time to shut up? Got it.
Let me add one thing to that, just as the co-op guy.
Yeah.
As the consumer here. I think what this represents though is an investment in infrastructure. You're trying to build a different exchange model that has a price and a value per gallon or a value per miles driven or whatever, that right now has a social component into it that the buyer's willing to pay for. We pay more per gallon.
That's true.
And whatever that portion is above your basic cost, your marginal cost structure is, we, and in the aggregate say that's worth it for us.
That's
What
right.
LCA allows you to do is, I think, to start to create a mathematical infrastructure in terms of a cost accounting that turns into a value accounting. That when, if we're able to make this a mass market kind of thing, we can say, yes, it's $4.25 a gallon, and this is $3.65 a gallon, but the cost per BTU, the cost per greenhouse gas, whatever unit you're looking at, this infrastructure gets laid today by these kinds of leaders. This kind of.
That's
Yeah, and you're adding value to the broader market that, we hope to see
Right.
will emerge.
You're right.
rather
Yeah,
than-
that's-
You can ask
It's-
Air
and-
Stater puts labels on food that they get paid more for
Yeah.
per pound of meat. If it says it's rancher versus it's
Yeah,
sustainable
grass
and
fed,
natural.
yeah, no, it's true.
And then they beg for certification because consumers go, what am I really paying for? So this industry getting ahead of that and saying, this is what you are paying for.
Got it.
Accountable.
All right, so dang, it's 10:49, I'm supposed to knock it off. I'm gonna go to the co-op meeting, or the co-op session is next. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyle.
All right.